Thank you, Dennis, and thanks to the gun owners of America for standing up for the Second Amendment in its original meaning. We owe them all a debt of gratitude. Now, I would like to say, just by way of a brief introduction, that about a year ago, I was approached. I'm pretty active in the Libertarian Party and have been for about 10 or 12 years now, and I was approached about a year ago by a gentleman who told me that he wanted to get the LP nomination for U.S. Senate for this election cycle. Well, having been through all of the vagaries of petitioning to get on the ballot and all kinds of details of roadblocks, which I won't bore all you folks with, I was a bit skeptical. I was concerned about running someone for U.S. Senate because that becomes our top of ticket and determines our ballot status, and we've been through a lot of changes in order to achieve that ballot status. But I have to say that over the course of the last year, that gentleman has made an absolute believer of me. And all of you people who are here this afternoon are evidence of his commitment and his dedication. Of course, I'm speaking about Jon Coon. Now, there is, of course, a Republican and a Democrat on the ballot, as there always is. They have made certain of that. But we, of course, want to remember that Spence Abraham, the Republican candidate, served as Chief of Staff for Dan Quayle during the Bush administration. And we all have to wonder about the brains behind Dan Quayle. Bob Carr, the Democrat, after having taken the NRA's money for his whole miserable political life, suddenly rolled over on all of us and voted for President Slick's assault weapons ban. So I think we know where Bob Carr stands. Thank God that into the fray comes a third alternative. And don't let these Republicrats and Demopublicans tell you that a Libertarian can't win and you're wasting your vote when you vote for a Libertarian. They've been suckering you with that for years. The fact of the matter is the Republicans and Democrats lie to us, they roll over on us, and they do the very kind of thing that President Clinton did, that President Bush did, that they all do. So I am pleased to be able to introduce the alternative to that, the alternative to politics as usual, the man that you should vote for if you would really like to make a difference in Washington, D.C., Mr. Jon Coon.
Geez, wasn't I just out here 10 minutes ago? This crowd is growing by the minute. All right. April 19th, 1775. It was on that date that 8 men, pretty simple men, plain artisan and craftsman, stood at the foot of a bridge in a place called Concord and faced down the most powerful military on the face of the earth. And you know, I don't know what was in the minds of those 8 men. I don't know what they were thinking that day. But I've got a pretty good idea what was in their hearts. And I can guarantee you there were no gun grabbers at Concord Bridge. And 2 years later, 1777, Washington had a band of about 10,000 men. Couldn't properly be called an army. Armies have to have equipment and clothes. But he had 10,000 men. He'd just been defeated at Germantown and Philadelphia. And he had them in a place called Valley Forge. And on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, Washington wrote in his journal that he had over 2,000 men in his camp who were unfit for duty by reason of being barefoot or otherwise naked. There weren't any gun grabbers at Valley Forge either. And if there's one thing I would like to do today, I would like to take the 535 people we have representing us in Washington and take them back in time 200 and some odd years and let them tell some young private wondering if his frozen feet would be amputated in the morning why it's okay to disarm the United States of America. That's what I'd like to do. But you know, I really don't have to take them back 200 years. You don't have to go back that far. Just this week, just yesterday, I was in a menswear store in Hazel Park, Michigan. Needed a pair of shoes. And I talked to a man named Jack, and I introduced myself to him. And we talked. Jack told me he served in World War II. Told me he was a Marine. Then he told me he was at Iwo Jima. Then he told me that he still goes in every 6 months to have shrapnel removed from his body. My hands and I shook hands with Jack and I said thank you. I don't know what else to do. How do you repay Jack? How do you repay the ones that didn't come back? I don't think there's any way that it can ever be repaid. I think the only thing you can do is respect what they did, respect what the ideals of the Constitution are, what they fought for, and defend them every day of your life. So Jack, I'm here today, I'm going to tell him. That's what we're here today for, is to tell him. On behalf of the ones at Valley Forge, on behalf of every soldier, every seaman, every airman, every widow and orphan, the neighbors, the aunts, the uncles, the names on the tombstones and the names on the Vietnam Wall. If our legislators don't understand what the Second Amendment means, then we're here to explain it. Number one, the Second Amendment is not about duck hunting. I'm a hunter, but it is not about hunting. And I have a family to defend, but I'll tell you right now, it's not about self-defense either. And it's certainly not about target shooting. The founders of this nation would have never dreamed that your right to hunt would be threatened. They would have never dreamed that your right to defend yourself would be threatened. And they certainly couldn't conceive of a people with so much money they could spend powder and lead on target shooting. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution was written by men who had just fought a war against an oppressive government. A government whose first targets were the arms and ammunition stores at Lexington and Concord. That amendment was written to ensure that the people of this nation would always retain the right to defend themselves from their own government. That's message number one. Get it and get it now! I have two other messages I want to get through today. Number one has to do with reasonableness. We hear all the time about being reasonable when it comes to our guns. Let me tell you what's not reasonable. What is not reasonable is driving a wedge through the very fabric of American patriotism. We have good, honest, hardworking, patriotic people who believe in the Constitution of the United States. And instead of concentrating on the criminals and the violent scum that are destroying this nation, we are driving a wedge between the good people of this nation. That's not leadership. Leadership is not division, it's unity. And that's message number one. Quit driving the wedge and do the things we all know will make a difference first. And here's message number two. This one is for the people who occupy this building behind me. And it's also for those who occupy the building way over there on the Potomac. Here's your message, folks. Now, no threats. I want them to notice only one thing. I want them to notice what exists on the east lawn of the Lansing Capitol today. I want them to know understand what happens when you get on the right side of this issue. Understand that there is an army of good, hard-working people out there who will be on your side if you'll just get up and get on the right side of it. Understand it. There are 2.5 million gun owners in the state of Michigan. And there are a lot more freedom lovers than that. Look around you. That's political clout, my friends. Look around you. I hope you'll all support me. I really hope you will. I need it, and I hope you will. But I'm going to offer you the reason before I get down from here and give this microphone up. I want you to know how I feel about this, and if you don't already, I'm going to make a pledge today. 218 years ago, a group of the bravest, most principled men in history signed their names to what at that time was a treasonous document. They put their names on the Declaration of Independence. And had the war gone the wrong way, they'd have been hung for it. And they ended that document with an affirmation of an oath they made to each other. They swore their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And I tell you here today, that when I'm elected, I will not only defend the Constitution of the United States, I will do everything in my power to reverse every encroachment made against it. And I pledge to you my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. Thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. I would like to see a show of hands. How many of you out there are parents? Okay, great. I'm 35 years old. I have 3 children who are carrying a $20,000 debt on their heads that was placed there by their government. They had nothing to say about it. And that, my friends, is the biggest reason why I'm running for office today. And I think everyone who just had their hand up can probably understand what that means and why it has to change. There is absolutely no reason why the next generation should not see a nation as free and as great and as prosperous as you and I have had the privilege to enjoy. And that's why I'm running. Why am I running as a libertarian? Because I want to be effective when I get there. It's that simple. And I do not believe that any freshman Republican or freshman Democrat will be effective when elected to the United States Senate. And I think we can prove that simply by looking at the 25% turnover we just had in the House of Representatives in 1992. I think we elected a lot of good people from both parties. But I think if you ask them why they've been unable to achieve some of the things they wanted to achieve, they'll tell you from both parties that the reason is because they have the heel of their own party on their throat and they can't get a thing done. I think we have to change that. I believe we need competition in this country. I think we need it in government just as we need it in business. And I shouldn't have to explain what competition does to this crowd. I think you folks know what it does. I think it brings out the best in every one of us, and I think it will bring out the best in our government. I want to talk to you a little bit about the things I believe in, because I know a lot of you don't know a whole lot about me. Let's talk about health care and education and crime and regulation real quickly. I do not believe that in the United States of America we need to follow a path towards socialism, and that's what I am seeing with most of the health care proposals that I've seen advanced over the last year. We have some problems with health care in this country. We have a number of people, the number varies depending on who you're talking to, who can't afford health insurance. They fall into that window between those who are on government assistance and have health care and those who make enough money to purchase it on their own. We have a group of people who are not on government assistance but can't afford health insurance. There are answers to that problem that do not involve increasing the size of an already bloated, overfunded, and irresponsible federal government. I support some pretty simple things like medical IRAs that allow people to make their own health care decisions, things like income tax refunds for health expenditures which take money that they would be paying to the federal government and give it back to them. Let's ask ourselves a simple question here. If the health care problem for these folks is so severe that we would even consider a socialist plan, then isn't it severe enough that we can give them back money that we're taking from them every day? Those are the kinds of things that I would support when it comes to health care. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on every issue here. I want to give you just a brief idea. Education. Education is a problem in the United States of America, but there was a time when no one would have considered what a federal candidate's position was on education, because education wasn't a federal concern. It was a state concern or a local concern, but not federal. And yet today it seems to be a burning federal issue that we must get involved in at the federal level. I don't support that idea at all. I think education benefits when the control over the curriculum and the funding gets back closer to the parents, and that's not federal, folks. That's moving the other way. I think we bought into two faulty assumptions in education. Number one, that more education or more money equals better education. I think that was a faulty assumption. And number two, that more centralized control equals better education. And I think we prove every day that both those assumptions were bad. And when we get the control closer to the parents, both in the funding and in the curriculum decisions, we will have better education. I homeschool my son, and I do it because he gets better education that way. And the best thing that's happened in the state of Michigan as far as education is concerned are the 3 Supreme Court decisions handed down last spring, which basically gave homeschoolers the right to educate their children. Crime. Both of my opposition are going to tell you they have the answer to crime. One of them is going to tell you we need 100,000 more police officers. The other was going to tell you we need to build more prisons and spend more tax dollars doing that. I'm here to tell you we don't need 100,000 more police officers until we learn how to support the ones we have on the streets right now. And we don't need to build more prison space until we learn what prisons are for. Some conservatives will tell you that prisons are to punish people. Some liberals will tell you that prisons are there to rehabilitate people. I believe that a prison is a place where you put someone who has proven that they cannot be trusted to respect individual rights and live in society, and that's the purpose, to keep them off the streets, to keep them out of society. And if that's the purpose of a prison, then we'd better have a priority system that makes sense, and that means you put violent prisoners there first. And a rapist, a robber, a murderer never gets bumped out of a bunk because somebody got caught cheating on their taxes. You don't do it that way. And until we can back up the police officers we have so they don't have to put the cuffs on the same punk 6 times before they serve any time, and before we can get our priorities straight with the prison system we already have, I will vehemently resist any attempts by anybody in Washington to tax the American people more for more prisons or more police officers. Regulation. I do not believe that the federal government needs to regulate the people or the businesses of this nation anymore. We have more regulations than we can possibly keep track of now. Things like cafe standards hurt. They hurt business. And if there's something good that needs to be done, and if it needs to be done at a government level, then why on earth would we not want to trust a government with a proven ability to balance a budget like the state of Michigan instead of a federal bloated bureaucracy that hasn't passed a budget in 20 years? If we need regulations, then let's do it in the state of Michigan. Let's not do it in Washington. I will oppose any attempts to further regulate business or to further infringe on the freedoms or the responsibilities of the people of this country from Washington. Now, I think that the #1 issue in this country is not crime, health care, education, or regulation. I've been on the campaign trail for 17 months. I've talked to people in gas stations, in restaurants, in their homes. And the one thing I keep hearing over and over and over again is one simple word. It's called responsibility. You'll never see that on an opinion poll. Those who conduct those polls, it's not in their best interest to ask people whether they think responsibility is the top issue or not. But I'm here to tell you, it is. It is. People are sick and tired of a federal government that cannot pass a federal budget. And by the way, is one party more to blame than the other? No way. We haven't had a balanced federal budget in over 20 years, and during that time we've had 3 Republican administrations, 2 Democratic administrations. And you know what it takes to stop a deficit budget? It takes 1 presidential veto. Now, we've had 5 presidents with the opportunity to do it. It takes 1 presidential veto and just 34 United States senators with the courage to back it up. And I'm telling you that at no time has either party been so weak that they couldn't stop a deficit budget, but it has not happened. There is no fiscally conservative party in Washington. I wish there was. And there's no party of the working people in Washington either. I wish there was. The only answer we have available to us is competition, and we're seeing the results of it all around the country in races all over at all levels right now. And the only way we're going to fix this country is to put that competition in Washington. I'm looking at a sign that says 30 seconds. That means I'm approaching the end of my time with you. Competition is the only way that we're going to get the job done. I'm just a hick from Henderson with an attitude, folks. Thank you.
Mr. Engler's been campaigning and saying that a vote for Jon Coon is a vote for Bob Carr.
I'm glad to know that he realizes that I'm a threat to the Republicans, and sooner or later the Democrats are going to realize what a serious threat I am to them too. And it's for a very simple reason. I just sat here and listened to a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate. The Republicans saying the Democrats raise taxes, the Democrats saying the Republicans raise taxes. I'd like to ask you both, who's right and who's wrong? I'd suggest you're both right, and the public out there knows it. The Republicans have raised taxes, and so have the Democrats.
Okay, Jen, here in Michigan, the Republican Party has we've reduced...
You had your chance to talk.
And you'll have
let
55
me
minutes.
tell you
Yeah,
what
expanding economy, we need to make sure that we have an expanding
Mr.
economy.
Carr, if every politician who ever promised a job had actually delivered one, every one of us would have 3 jobs.
You're looking at
the
one.
dog would have to
You're
have
looking
a job.
at one. Well,
if every politician who promised one actually delivered,
listen, my good
how many
friend.
jobs have you promised?
I have
Support the 1%. Gentlemen, just a second. Mr. Coon has an editorial comment.
Yeah,
I'll make
right.
this quick so we can move on to the other 2 candidates here. It's pretty simple. Just let me propose something to you. Let me propose that in 20 years we get back a responsible government, and the people once again can pledge allegiance to the flag in this country and get the lump in the throat like they used to, and we have responsible government. What are the history books going to say? Are they going to say that we started to get a change in government on the year that Spencer Abraham, the Republican, was elected with his Shake Up Washington platform? Are the history books going to say we got our change the year that Bob Carr was elected to the U.S. Senate? Are they going to say we got our change in 1994 when the people of this country finally decided to send a message to Washington?
Mr. Roundtree.
Leave you with that. Hi, I'm Jon Coon, Libertarian for U.S. Senate. And there's something you should know about Channel 7's U.S. Senate debate. You should know that Bob Carr agreed to debate me, and Spencer Abraham refused. You should know that Channel 7 is helping Abraham by keeping me out of this debate. Channel 7's major sponsors, Art Van, New York Carpet World, and Gardner White, are all aware of this, and I thought you should be aware of it too. Maybe you should call them and ask if this Republican should be allowed to hide. Hi, I'm Jon Coon, Libertarian for U.S. Senate. You've probably heard about me because we've run an effective campaign, in spite of being outspent over 20 to 1. It doesn't take millions to run an effective campaign, and it doesn't take a $5 trillion debt to run a country either. I'd like to go to Washington and be just as effective with your tax dollars. So I hope you look for my name November 8th.
Elect Jon Coon, Libertarian, to the United States Senate. There's a movement sweeping the country that the two older political parties don't want you to know about. And although it's the #1 political alternative in the nation, they'll be telling you that voting for a Libertarian candidate is wasting your vote. My name is Finley Rothaus, Libertarian State Representative from New Hampshire. I'm here in Michigan to help campaign with Jon Coon, your Libertarian Party candidate for U.S. Senate. And I'm also here to tell you that the idea that a Libertarian cannot get elected is just not true. The fact is that another freshman Democrat or Republican cannot make a difference in Washington. If you really want to send a message, elect a U.S. Senator who you can be certain won't raise your taxes. Elect a U.S. Senator who will work tirelessly to balance our federal budget and absolutely will not compromise.
I'm just a hick from Henderson with an attitude, folks. Thank you.
Elect Jon Coon, Libertarian, to the United States Senate.